The best late-night conservative talk show in America, Sackheads Radio. And listen, there are no people better on the air to give you the best in conservative talk than Sackhead Sean and Sackhead Clint. And we're working on immigration papers for a certain other guy who happens to work here, too. For those who are tuning in around the world to the best in late-night conservative talk, Sackheads Radio.
Sackheads. Sackheads.
Radio.
Sackheads. Sackheads.
Radio.
The best late-night conservative talk show in America. In America.
In America. And in this web was a large, I'm pretty sure it was the biggest spider I've ever seen.
Let me share with you everything I can at this point in time. We've seen reports of a video that purports to be the murder of U.S. citizen Steven Sotloff by ISIL. The intelligence community will work as quickly as possible to determine its authenticity. If the video is genuine, we are sickened by this brutal act taking the life of another innocent American citizen. Our hearts go out to the Sotloff family, and we will provide more information as it becomes available.
And as we all know now, it was Steven Sotloff that was brutally murdered by that English bastard. Who's running with ISIS, the same one who killed Mr. Foley. Sotloff, another American journalist who was taken captive while covering it in Syria. Another message directly to his family and the president. And again, our response has been very minimal on all this. It is the Sackheads Radio Show. It is the 3rd of September, 2014. We thank you so much for being here. 800-545-5708. The phone lines will be open tonight. If you're local, 916-550-8406 is the phone number as well. I'm your host, Sackhead Sean. Sacco will be filling in for Clint tonight, so it'll be quiet on that behalf.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to the exceptional one himself, Ken McClinton, who we love to follow here on our Wednesday night fiasco. Makes things wonderful for us. Thank you for the Evan Miller reporter who's on earlier in the day and some of the other great talent here on shrmedia.com. So much to talk about this week. So much has happened. ISIS has proven to be more and more, as we talked about last week, way beyond the JV squad that the president said they were over a month ago. Just top down, and this some of the things we're going to touch on is, Obama's speech today, England upgrading their terror threat to severe, Biden chimed in, 9/11 versus coming up, issues with ISIS as close as Mexico. And that's just on the ISIS front. I have some comments on Debbie Washburn-Schultz. We may not do a full 2 hours because, well, frankly, there's only two of us, and Sacco doesn't really like to talk. I think everyone thinks that when you have the mic that you're going to, just flourish.
Hold on.
But you're kind of shy.
You're trying to say I don't like to talk or that you don't allow me to talk?
I don't allow you to talk,
okay.
But it's the same type of idea, right?
Totally different. I'm just going to sit here, and every time you make a statement, I'm just going to question you and just grill you for 20 questions.
Oh, so it's just like Clint.
Thing.
It's just like Clint's in the room. Clint is traveling again this week and unable to make the show, but we couldn't miss the week. And listen, folks, I'm sure unless you've been hiding under a rock or an Air Force One or the White House, you've heard of the ISIS, the Islamic State, that they're this group in northern Iraq and Syria trying to create a caliphate, an Islamic State. I want everyone to do me a favor. And this is not an exaggeration, and this isn't to scare, which I want to talk about Alan Colmes' comments on Fox News, but discuss a little bit the liberal approach to all of this, and which is disgusting as well on some level. But I want you to go to Google. I know we're not supposed to use Google on this show. Clint gets mad. You can go to anything you want, Bing, Yahoo, and just search ISIS space beheadings, BEHEADINGS. and look at the disgust that these monsters, startpage.com, there you go. Thank you, Eggs in the chat room. If you are listening, you can jump into the chat room by going to shrmedia.com and clicking live chat.
It's pretty horrific.
It's unbelievable. And there are still shots from the Foley and Sotloff beheadings, but there's also still shots of children, heads on fences, and I really want you to take notice and really look at it, because one of the things, and we touched on it a little bit last week, and Clint and I were on the phone today talking about what I was going to discuss on the show with you this evening, is the beyond barbaric actions that these individuals take. But it really goes to your soul when you look at these pictures of children, young men, innocent people, maybe people they were fighting with, but it's still horrific. And understand that those of us who've been following this from the beginning know the horror, but there are still people apologizing for ISIS out there, or at least on behalf of Muslims everywhere to include ISIS in the apology. And one of the things that I'm mad at is groups like CARE that have yet to come out and essentially say, you know what, as a Muslim, I'm offended by ISIS, and I hope they get wiped off the planet. There hasn't been enough outrage, and we've talked about this before. There hasn't been enough outrage from the Muslim community and the Islam community about these beheadings
Well, I'm
and
going
the
to stop
horror.
you real quick.
Go ahead.
Because do you think that when you say there's not enough outrage, what are you expecting from them?
I want people, and I know if you talk, and I've talked to a couple of Muslims and about this, and individually they're upset.
Right.
And rightfully
you
so.
talk to them here in the U.S.
Some are upset.
Right.
There are some that aren't, and I can guarantee you there are some that absolutely aren't. As you look more and more, we're finding out that some of the Americans we're finding over fighting in Syria, Islamists that were American born and raised, as a kid out of Minnesota, who we found out worked for Delta Airlines before he went over to fight. But I'm talking about being angry against radicalized Islam, if that's the speech we want to go with, if that's the direction we want to go. But
I get what you're saying.
the individuals, yes, you are going to find individuals who are angry about this. But I'm talking about the quote-unquote leaders. When you start, when you go to Ferguson, immediately you flash to Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, those people who are self-appointed leaders of that community.
Right.
And I'm talking the same thing with the self-appointed leaders, CARE, and other Islamic groups who are not coming out and denouncing, and even more so, calling for the horrific animals that are in ISIS to be stopped. The Muslim community as a whole is, again, quiet about this. And this is something, again, not all.
I get what you're saying, but do you think that they're quiet because if they say anything, that they're going against their country, and then now
No, because it's not their country. Where do they live?
Well, okay, they're all over. But
Right, but I'm talking about in our country, in America.
in our country,
Right.
yes, they should be upset.
Yeah.
It's
If you're
I'm
still,
not trying to defend them.
No,
but-
I understand. You're trying to show me a different point of view.
Right.
I understand what you're saying, but you know what? When there's an incident, let me rephrase this. Let's just say there was a Catholic movement to turn all the Middle East Catholic, and you have all these Catholic, and I also use Catholic because I am Catholic. You have all these Catholics that were going over to the Middle East and murdering Muslims who are not converting, not following the Ten Commandments versus Sharia law, and I'm not comparing the two, I'm just using it as an example. I would immediately denounce it. If they were murdering children, beheading people, trying to convert people, and essentially, essentially saying, you go our way or we kill you.
Right.
As a Catholic, I would denounce it. I would disown the Catholic Church if the Catholic Church did not call for it to end and call for them to be prosecuted or killed, or however you want to look at it, and to say that is not our view. That is not the view of our church.
Right.
I would expect that. And I'll tell you what, you damn well better believe the rest of the world would be demanding that statement as well from the Catholic Church.
Right. No, I agree.
So
I agree.
I want to know, and I know, Jason, I understand the point Sacco is making. There are many individual Muslims all over the world. I know several Muslims who I talk to on a regular basis.
I know a few as well, yeah.
And they are outraged.
They are upset.
But here's the funny part. All the ones I know are really bad Muslims in the sense that they don't go to mosque on a regular basis. They don't live by the rule. It's kind of like a lot of the Irish Catholic growing up. We go to church every Sunday, and then once we leave church, we're hellions. We go against every commandment. You know,
I'll give you a perfect example. I have a friend named Saeed. He's Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
He was super outraged at the fact that even when it came back to 9/11, going back, everyone was kind of in this bowl of, you guys are part of this Muslim terrorist group. And it was like, no, we're not a part of them.
Right.
We're separate. There's just a select few radicals that choose to make a bad name.
right. The select few radicals we're talking about right now is upwards
ISIS.
of 200,000.
Right. Which is a huge number.
That's a big population. It's a lot different than if, again, 20 Catholics went into a Muslim community and killed 25 people to convert them. You're talking 200,000 fighting in the name of... And I get that they pervert the religion, and I'm not saying... But
we're just talking about how upset a few of our friends are and how enough of the people we don't know should be upset.
But what I'm saying is the leaders, the people that fight for, quote-unquote, the good name of Islam in this country, care and everything else, and when you say something even slightly, and I'm sure I'm going to get slammed for this, even slightly negative against Islam and compare it to ISIS, etc., they attack immediately. How dare you? That's Islamophobic and blah, 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 blah. Is it not even more Islamophobic to be murdering your own people or to go against your religion? Because if you talk to a lot of Islamists, they'll tell you that it's a very, not Islamists, I'm sorry, a lot of Muslims, they will tell you that the basis of the religion is supposed to be peaceful. And if you talk to them one-on-one, they will tell you this is a perverted sect of the religion. They will equate it to the Crusades that happened hundreds of years ago. And I agree, the Crusades was a terrible thing that happened. Spanish Inquisition, not another wonderful thing that happened. However, I would today, like I said, denounce it. And I want to know why the leaders of the Muslim community are not coming out full throttle and rallying the other Muslims. And I know they're there because I've been told they're there, rallying the other Muslims around there to make sure that they're not providing aid. If they're related to people of that, turning them in.
Sean,
all that stuff. That needs to happen.
I agree with you, but at the same time, I understand why they haven't.
Right.
That's all. Coming from my point of view, if
Why?
I was over there in Islam and all around me, surrounding, are ISIS terrorists, that
So
if you put a target on your forehead and say, "Hey, I don't agree with you guys," your whole city will get wiped out, or you'll see more beheadings. Your children will get stolen.
I understand that, but that's already a potential anyhow.
It is,
and
but
at some point, this is the problem that I have: is there is the right thing to do, and then you look at you think of Anne Frank. There's a lot of people,
right,
who have gone to that spearhead, who have stepped in front, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Right.
What I'm calling for is the leaders, the people who live in lavish houses and all that stuff, to come out and start denouncing it. Because you know what? The 200,000 are easily outnumbered, but they are so... and I understand
if they're organized against the 200,000.
I understand how damaged they are. And I understand how horrific they are. They're so bad that Saudi Arabia this week is turning around to us and essentially say, hey, just so you know, they're going to be in your country in 2 months, which is the Saudis' king way of saying, help us get them now because they're on our doorstep. And if you don't take action, meaning the Western world, they're probably going to start affecting us, and I don't know how I can stop them. So they're turning to us.
Right.
The Qataris are having issues. I'm reading right now, Jason just popped something up, that Islamic militants killed 770 Iraqi troops. We are coming up on the 10-year anniversary of the Beslan Elementary School in which the Islamist extremists killed all those children. There's 16 suspected Islamic militants arrested in Bosnia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But one of the things that I'm trying to get, the point I'm trying to make,
is that the leaders should be
right,
making more of an effort.
You now have radicalized Americans, radicalized British, radicalized French, and a lot of other countries who are going to fight on behalf of ISIS and Islam, or the radical Islam, against our people, essentially, and against innocent people. And until that message gets out at home and in the quote-unquote civilized world, if you will, because right now northern Iraq and Syria is not a civilized world, and get to these kids who are in these mosques, who are a part of that religion now, and take the place of the people who are radicalizing them now. Don't let them go to the internet to find answers. Get out in front of it. It's your responsibility. It really is. You know, we forget, and if this had happened when Hitler started in World War II with the Jews,
right?
If they got out ahead of it, how many lives would have been spared? And I know Hitler wasn't necessarily a religious approach, but who he attacked was the Jews are a religion.
Right.
But if people got out ahead of it and stopped letting him do what he wanted to do until it was too late, my biggest fear right now with ISIS, and listen, I'm going to read a report from Breitbart letting you know that they're much closer to home than they want to be. But they're spreading, and they're like, you know, they call them a cancer, and
they're a plague.
They're a cancer and a plague for a reason. And what's happening is they're doing the same thing the Taliban did. They're doing the same thing Al Qaeda did, but they're doing it much more carte blanche, if you will. In that region is they have some money and they wield power. And those who they're going up to and joining them, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's power, sometimes it's ideology. But what they're doing is all the same. They're killing innocents.
Right.
They're already, I mean, you look at Britain and the problem they're having, and not just the Rotterdam, and don't get me wrong, that is a horrendous tragedy. I want to talk about that a little bit later in the show. But, you know, there was the British soldier that was killed by the Muslim extremists. I think it was a year and a half ago. They're having more and more issues with extremists in Britain. I mean, you look at the 9/10 attacks, the Spain bombing. I mean, you go on and on. It's starting to become more and more. And that was before ISIS. And listen, folks, ISIS is a group that Al Qaeda would not join with because Al Qaeda deemed them too extreme. Al Qaeda, the people that flew planes into the trade centers and the Pentagon and to the ground in Pennsylvania that a group of heroes stopped. All of that. And Al Qaeda looks at ISIS and says, whoa, we don't want any part of them. Which I'm going to tell you what's going to happen with Al Qaeda. They're going to be absorbed. And they're going to be absorbed in the sense of you either join us or die.
Right.
The same thing with the Taliban. The Taliban's already in talks with ISIS now. There's been reports. So there's a lot of things going on. And now the Libya is really starting to ratchet up. There's the trouble in Libya starting to ratchet up. ISIS is just dying to get to Libya full-fledged. I'm sure they're already there, but I mean like they have a hold in Western Syria. I mean Syria and Iraq. They're on their way there because there's a void there. And we can argue as to why there's a void there because we had a hand in that, our country, I mean. But there's a void there that they're thinking they can fill. And if they can get to Libya, there's a good chance that they can overrun the Libyan people pretty easily, just based on the masses. And they now have kind of a set city. They have an infrastructure. There's not a lot in northern Iraq. Yeah, you do have some cities and towns and the dam and all that stuff. Not a lot. There's some in Syria.
That's good that they have an infrastructure because then we can pinpoint exactly where they're at.
No, it's horrible.
Would you rather have them hiding in holes or in
they're already hiding in holes, and they're also going to be hiding in innocent communities.
Okay, so
they're going to do exactly
communities are different than having
right. They're going to be but they're going to do exactly what Gaza does. Oh, weird, Gaza, another Islamist extremist group, or Hamas. Exactly what Hamas does in Gaza. They're going to hide in the homes and launch their missiles, and then when the counterattacks come, everyone's going to blame Israel. They blamed Israel, and everyone's going to blame us for doing it. There's already been outcry that we've bombed certain things. So
I'm gonna throw this out there while we're talking about war here, because this is essentially what it's going to be in a second. Let's
between me
say,
and you, bring it on.
Okay. let's say okay, the U.S. wants to put a stop to this. They send out troops down to the eastern side.
No boots on the ground, according to the president.
That's what he said. No boots on the ground.
That's
okay.
what he said about Iraq a long time. 2 months ago now?
Right. We'll see how well that's going. So
even though there's now 350 boots on the ground in Baghdad, but that's not the point. Go on.
So hypothetically, let's say we go over there because for whatever reason the world always relies on the U.S. to make sure everything is okay, and then Russia attacks because now Russia sees, oh, the U.S. is busy. They have their troops over there. It's a weak point. Let's do this.
No, because here's the funny part is we could repel militarily a Russia attack so much easier because our equipment is more advanced. Don't get me wrong, Russia has some advanced equipment. Now, does that mean that when we change focus back to the Middle East, away from the Ukraine, in which Russia invaded, will they now move to Estonia and start trying to take? Yeah, I think that Putin would seize that opportunity. I also, and I talked to Clint about this today, and he thinks I'm a little crazy, but I also think you might see Putin.
You are crazy.
I am. You might see Putin trying to interject his way into the ISIS thing to try to get, quote unquote, peace and be that hero.
I don't see that ever happening.
You watch. He's crazy, not stupid. And he does anything he can to make himself look good when he's in a bad spot. And he's in a bad spot right now. So,
but he doesn't care.
He doesn't. He does, but he doesn't. No, I understand what you're saying.
But,
So that's kind of who I'm angry at for not speaking out against ISIS. Don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, the people that are committing these horrific acts are the one that need to be penalized for it.
Right.
And they're the ones who need to be killed, in my opinion.
Right.
I even said if we can get the name, and I know there's some names tossed around, if we can get the name of the actual British Islamist who's over there who beheaded our 2 Americans, I think that somebody, not me, and I won't do it, and I'm not condoning this, but I think it's going to happen. You're going to see crowdsourcing for a bounty on his head. Kickstarter, one of those things. Somebody's going to start it.
Kickstarter.
A Kickstarter to put a bounty on his head. And I'll tell you right now, the whole reason I said people at the beginning of the show to the beheadings, and I talked about ISIS, is to get to the point, is this group is like nothing we have seen before.
You're right.
They're worse than Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda hit us on 9/11. There was the World Trade Center bombings. We've had other issues with Al-Qaeda all over the world. And these guys are supposed to be worse than Al-Qaeda. And in this country, we have people like Alan Colmes, uber liberal, crazy liberal, who's essentially says something to the effect of, we have to stop scaring people with all this ISIS stuff, and that they could be coming here, and that they could be doing harm here. Folks,
They could be. All that is true.
Law enforcement, the military, and the federal government have been warning against extremist groups coming to this country for some time now. They've also been warning against the type of attacks that are going to happen. You'll never see a 9/11 attack again. Most likely, and before everyone jumps on Libya and the 11 airplanes, I'll get to it. But you'll never see a 9/11 attack in this country used airplanes on that scale again, unless we fail so miserably in our intelligence community that we allow it to happen. But I think we're watching for stuff like that. And it's easily controlled. They need an airplane. We know what we're looking for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that you are going to see an increase in these attacks. Small unit tactics, individual attacks, IEDs, et cetera, in schools like Beslan, in movie theaters like Aurora, Colorado, in mall shootings, et cetera, et cetera. I think you're going to see them go through the roof because you can have 4 guys. And listen, here's how ISIS kind of runs things from the intel that I've read, and I've gotten some behind-the-scenes look at stuff. ISIS essentially says to them, here's your target of opportunities. Here's what you should use. You guys pick it. You 4 or 5. You guys figure it out, pick it, and then go do it. It's not like Al-Qaeda where it came from with Bin Laden and everything. Al-Qaeda's like the old mob, if you will, the old Italian mafia. That's kind of how Al-Qaeda was running things. nothing happened without Bin Laden giving it the okay.
Right. So
And
what's
I
the
hate
difference
to,
here? Is it
well,
not one person? It's a group of a
well,
council?
you're starting to see. ISIS is more like the Russian mob. They're more like just groups of thugs that are unpredictable and uncontrollable, i.e., Bloods and Crips, groups like that started off as a small group and then they spread and spread and spread, and there's no real control on those groups whatsoever. The mob used to run things, and Al-Qaeda ran things the same way, where nothing happened without certain people saying okay. ISIS is giving them intel, training, information, and potential targets, and then saying to them, you go do whatever you want. We'll see it on the news, essentially. So it's harder to track because there's not the big buildup like there was with the underwear bomber. We kind of knew it was coming. You know, there's some things that have happened that we've been able to get out ahead of it for the bigger style attacks. These are smaller. They require, 5 or 6 AK-47s, couple hundred rounds of ammunition, all easily brought over the border through Mexico right now. And they're coming over the border through Mexico, so that's convenient for them. IEDs, which, you and I have a mutual friend who is
the bomb expert.
A bomb expert, and he did his time in Afghanistan with the Marines, and that was his thing, his demolitions, and I talked about this last week. You don't need gunpowder and explosives like that to be able to create IEDs. You can go into a janitor's closet and create an IED. It's very simple to do, and he was explaining it to us, why it's so scary. It's very simple to do. Those are the style of attacks that are coming. And, folks, I hate to say it, with the anniversary of 9/11 right around the corner, 8 days away from the time that we sit and talk about it, we haven't increased our threat level. I know that they're on edge, and I know the intel community is working. I'm not denouncing what they're saying. I'm sure the NSA is actually focused on things outside the country for once and less on people inside the country. But the chatter has increased.
They're increased on the inside, so that...
Well, both.
Because
both.
the inside's
they're
what matters
looking
at
for
the
in and
moment.
out and in, yeah. But they're more worried about outside to in because that's going to be where their slip-up was going to be. Iggy just pointed out in the chat room that Las Vegas has been heard jihad chatter hitting Las Vegas Strip. All those types of things are very easily. And listen, I can tell you how unprepared we as a nation are on the civilian side of things. Law enforcement has plans. The feds have plans if they had to protect the land. The military has plans both for at home and abroad, and we can talk about who they're planning for, but they have a plan. Civilians in general, civilian infrastructure...
We're not armed.
Civilian infrastructure in general is not prepared for this type of attack. We refuse to. Why? Because liberals, the ones running this country, the Alan Colmes of the world, are afraid that if they actually start recognizing this threat and explaining the threat, the sheep won't keep eating grass. And they may start paying notice that the world is a dangerous place. It's gotten increasingly dangerous in the last 6 years. And there are people responsible, i.e. the president, for allowing it to get to this point. You look at our southern border. You look at what's going on with ISIS in Syria. You look at what's going on all over the world. North Korea's acting up again. Russia's in Ukraine. It all comes to one person. I hate to say it. The man who's supposed to be the leader of the free world has no plan for dealing with one of the biggest threats to the free world. We're up against a break. We come back. I get a couple sound clips I want to play from Jumbo Joe Biden. Believe it or not, it's not him doing a cake stand. It's actually something semi-vice presidential. I get some things from Obama and Prime Minister David Cameron of England. We're going to be back in 3 here on the Sackheads Radio Show.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Here's radio.
Back here on the Sackheads Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. 800-545-5708 is the phone number if you want to chime in. So, we do have a couple speeches I want to get to. First, Sacco, let's play Joe Biden's speech from today. Joe pulled himself out of a strip joint and put himself in front of a microphone.
That's impressive.
When these barbarians replicated with Stephen what they did with Foley, who is from New Hampshire, they somehow think that it's going to lessen U.S. resolve, frighten us, intimidate us. But if they think the American people will be intimidated, they don't know us very well. We came back after 9/11. We dusted ourselves off and we made sure that Osama bin Laden would never, ever again threaten the American people. We came back, Boston strong, blaming no one but resolve to be certain that this didn't happen again. Today, America may be grieving, still grieving from Jim Foley, a native of New Hampshire, as I said, who grew up in Rochester. But the American people are so much stronger, so much more resolved than any enemy can fully understand. As a nation, we're united. And when people harm Americans, we don't retreat. We don't forget. We take care of those who are grieving. And when that's finished, they should know we will follow them to the gates of hell until they are brought to justice. Because hell is where they will reside. Hell is where they will reside.
Well, first and foremost, I'm actually impressed with Biden's speech. And not because he put together a couple cohesive sentences. That's always impressive from Biden. But I think Joe is legitimately pissed off. And now that the president's out of the country, he had a chance to go make a speech. And I really think this is how Joe felt. If you go back to Joe after 9/11, within the first few days, there's a couple clips out of there of him pissed off. And we joke all the time about Joe, but Joe, I think, is much different from the president when it comes to Americans being hurt.
He feels more empathetic towards them?
Oh, I think he gets pissed. I really do. And we talk about Joe in politics all the time, but I think at the end of the day, Joe kind of gets that certain things need to happen. I think Joe, if it was up to Joe, we'd be launching well more than the 100 bombs or so that we've already dropped on ISIS. I think Joe would go BSC on them, totally batshit crazy. And I agree, Ags in the chat room saying that Biden plays the clown on purpose. To a point, I also think he is a little bit of a clown. But I think Joe's speech really sums up what a lot of people in America... The only problem I had is the whole bringing to justice, because I get really mad when there is a war crime being committed, and if you're going to put them in a tribunal and prosecute them that way, a military tribunal, because it's a war crime, okay. But when it comes time to go to war, and it comes time to get these bastards who are killing Americans and thousands of other innocent people,
should be punishable by death. In my opinion.
But there's no bringing to justice. We're not arresting them. The police bring people to justice. The FBI does, even though they shouldn't exist. But the FBI is supposed to... When you start talking about bringing people to justice, you're talking about our Constitution, our laws, people that deserve it. You know, when people come into our country and they commit a crime... Egg in the chat room. Usually bringing people to justice means giving someone more food stamps. And I know Iggy's bringing up a great point, and I don't want to get off topic, but Iggy's bringing up a great point on Biden and the Patriot Act. I'm not denying any of that. I'm talking about Joe the person. I think the speech you heard today, it wasn't Joe the politician. I think it's Joe the person. They're very different people. Yeah. And I think he's pissed off. And I would actually like to commend him in the sense that this is the first time anybody in the White House has gotten really pissed off about what's going on. And we talked at the end of last week, I think it was last week, we were talking about like what Obama could do with ISIS to actually win back support from this country. And remember we were talking about having the wrestlers and the sparklers and everything? Yeah, get pissed off. You know, if he honestly went out there...
Here's what I think it was with Biden. I think when it comes to politics, it's just business. When it comes to troops or just people, innocent people being killed, it's more personal.
Yes.
And when it becomes personal, you tend to see that anger come out of people, and most people in general. And Biden, he was greatly affected by it based on the way he reacted in that speech.
Yeah. I think he's personally upset.
Which is great.
It is great.
Should be personally upset because it's...
And I think it's okay for our leaders to show that emotion. And we've talked about this with the president just being so monotone about everything all the time.
It's annoying when he's monotone. So what's great about being personal is that when you show emotion, it shows that, okay, these people aren't just politicians anymore. They're real people with emotions, and they're just as upset as I am.
Well,
I like this guy. That's the way it comes across.
And I understand that. And, you know, there are people already in the chat room saying, you know, some on the left are pissed because of votes. And I agree that you're going to have those people that are going to use this to garner votes. But I also agree that you see people kind of put politics aside.
You can see past that.
You see certain people, not everybody, but you will see certain people where politics kind of mean nothing. And I think that was Joe during that speech. I'm not saying that Joe's not a politician. He's a lifelong politician. That's all he's ever really been. But I think in that speech, you saw for the first time somebody in our leadership kind of go off on ISIS. And I think that needs to happen more. Listen, Ken in the chat room, I was for ISIS before I was against ISIS. You know, after 9/11, politicians were pissed on both sides, and they had every right to be. years later, everyone gave Bush a hard time when he gave the speech talking to the terrorists, and he essentially said, "I'm going to come get you." And they all, the redneck from Texas, and we're going to get you. And they all went after that. But what they didn't take in is what the terrorists see when the president says something like that.
Yeah.
That's a direct message.
We should be broadcasting more of that upset feeling towards them, saying, "Hey, we're going to come after you, and you should be scared because we have the resources to destroy your life."
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
should
exactly
be scared.
what we should be doing, but
we're
are
not
we doing instead.
So
we're sad for the tragedy. Sorry, guys.
Brit Hume actually had an amazing, and I'm not the biggest Brit Hume fan, but he was on Fox, and he said, they're about to wake up a sleeping giant in this country. ISIS is. We're war weary, we're tired, we don't want to get into another conflict. But if he keeps going and ISIS keeps doing this, they're gonna, because you know what? Even those hardcore lefts, and I told a story after Foley was murdered of a friend of mine who immediately, and he's one of the biggest leftist liberals I've ever met. Nice guy, but his politics are horrible. Turned around and said, "We need to go get that bastard right now and cut his head off." And that's how this affects people. They don't realize that the fire they're playing with, ISIS doesn't. And when you actually have this vice president who is the same guy who said, "Have you ever gone to a Dunkin' Donuts and not seen a damn Indian working there?" And he did say that. Or a 7-Eleven. I can't remember which one it was. That's this president. To this, it shows you the ball is starting to roll. And I know there's politics involved, and I get that. There's politics right now being talked about as to why we're dropping bombs without getting congressional approval. And that was a thing between James Cameron and Psaki the other day at the State Department. But at the end of the day, people are starting to wake up a little bit because of these horrific images.
Well, I have a question for you.
Yes.
You always say, or you just said, we're a sleeping giant, and the more they go, the more we're going to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
How much bloodshed and death must there be before we wake up? How long do you think America will let this go? Not America, but President Obama. In
America, because a lot of America, and I don't disagree, but a lot of us citizens think that we should just pack up all around the world and come home and just call it a day. Unless they're coming across to kill us here, we want no part of it. I don't necessarily...
That's great to think about, but in reality, that just says, hey, we're going to give you guys a head start in preparing to attack us.
That does become a problem. But I think the problem is you need... One of the things that we used to have in this country, it happened after 9/11, it happened after Pearl Harbor, is it was such a shock to the country's conscience. And I go back to everyone who is against the Iraq war after they voted for it, and all these people in this country who was against the war on terror after Bush left the White House. This country was so angry during both those times.
Everyone was for it. There's not one person I talked to that was not for that war.
Right, then. But now everyone's trying to backstep and, we love peace and we got to be the international person. But we've had this narrative for the last 6 years, right? Where we got to be a better international player and we have to let other countries deal with this problem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Essentially, we've retracted. Violence is bad. We have that whole psychology that we're violent because of certain things and not just because it's our nature. And we are violent by nature. We're a violent being by nature. That's who we are. Some of us control it better than others, and some of us use it at the right time versus just whenever. However, misplaced multiculturalism. Thank you, Agrido. I think that's an outstanding way to put it. But what's going to happen is more and more people are going to get upset. And more people are going to demand that something's going to happen or something has to happen to these people, these scumbags, these animals over in ISIS. So I think you're going to see them wake that sleeping giant. Now, so you had Biden come out, and Biden gave a pretty rousing speech. You listen to Joe, and it sounds like, planes are firing up, we're getting ready to go. Like, that sounds like he is preparing people for the fact that it might come out. Now, play the president's speech today from Estonia.
To Anne, we know that if we are joined by the international community, we can continue to shrink.
Earlier today, the Home Secretary confirmed that the...
I think this is the one.
I want to say that today the prayers of the American people are with the family of a devoted and courageous journalist, Stephen Sotloff. Overnight, our government determined that tragically Stephen was taken from us in a horrific act of violence. We cannot even begin to imagine the agony that everyone who loves Stephen is feeling right now, especially his mother, his father, and his younger sister. So today our country grieves with them. Like Jim Foley before him, Steve's life stood in sharp contrast to those who murdered him so brutally. They make the absurd claim that they kill in the name of religion, but it was Stephen, his friends say, who deeply loved the Islamic world. His killers try to claim that they defend the oppressed, but it was Stephen who traveled across the Middle East, risking his life to tell the story of Muslim men and women demanding justice and dignity. Whatever these murderers think they'll achieve by killing innocent Americans like Stephen, they have already failed. They failed because, like people around the world, Americans are repulsed by their barbarism. We will not be intimidated. Their horrific acts only unite us as a country and stiffen our resolve to take the fight against these terrorists. And those who make the mistake of harming Americans will learn that we will not forget and that our reach is long and that justice will be served.
Now that you say a second American has been slain.
Okay. Now, I feel bad, obviously, for the Sotloff family and the Foley family. But I feel bad for Obama's speechwriter, and here's why. That speech was supposed to have some inflection, some anger, some spirit to it. The wording was there, with the exception of justice at the end. But even if they're going to talk about, like, swift life justice, not even necessarily bringing them to court, which we all know he's thinking about court, but let's just throw that out for a second. He is so monotoned and just checked out.
Here's how the speech should have went. We're deeply affected by Sotloff's, death, and we're not going to back down. We're actually going to come after you guys, and basically, it should have went towards, we're going to kill you, and we're going to get you quick, and sometime soon.
Right.
And you should be afraid and go into hiding because...
We're coming.
We're coming.
Amazingly, kind of what Bush said after 9/11.
Right.
Which is weird.
We're going to come get you. You think you did something great, you're about to see death.
Yeah.
And then America would have cheered, and we would have been like, yes, this president's doing something awesome.
Right. Again, last week we talked about if he went over the top and made this the hallmark moment of his presidency, he actually had the opportunity to maybe save some Democrats politically, get the country riled up in November, get the country riled up, send a direct message that we are not going to piss around with you idiots. We're just going to take care of the problem. And if you hurt another American, so help you, we'll be there faster than you can blink. That speech was supposed to be a speech to kind of get people going. It was supposed to have the inflection like Joe had. I really believe that. Now, the wording of it wasn't terrible. It sent a message, with the exception of justice at the end. It sent a message. We will not be intimidated. You do not scare us. We do have a long reach. And he kind of did say we're not afraid to use it. I will give him credit to that point that he said those words. Not a lot of credit, because we've been fooled by this president in the past when he, quote-unquote, tough talks. Now, this is why. Play speech number 2, or the follow-up question number 2.
To Anne, we know that if we are joined by the international community, we can continue to shrink ISIL's sphere of influence, its effectiveness, its financing, its military capabilities, to the point...
Not a military, the terrorists.
It is a manageable problem. And the question is going to be making sure we've got the right strategy, but also making sure that we've got the international will to do it. This is something that is a continuation of a problem we've seen certainly since 9/11, but before. And it continues to metastasize in different ways. And what we've got to do is make sure that we are organizing the Arab world, the Middle East, the Muslim world, along with the international community, to isolate this cancer, this particular brand of extremism that is first and foremost destructive to the Muslim world and the Arab world in North Africa and the people who live there. They're the ones who are most severely affected. They're the ones who are constantly under threat of being killed. They're the ones whose economies are completely upended to the point where they can't produce their own food and they can't produce the kinds of goods and services to sell in the world marketplace. And they're falling behind because of this very small and narrow but very dangerous segment of the population. And we've got to combat it in a sustained, effective way, and I'm confident we'll get it.
Okay. So you had a speech where the wording essentially was, our reach is long, we will not be intimidated, etc., etc., etc. And then we get into, well, the international community, and we need to garner support, and we need to make sure that these people, first we have to reach out to the Muslim community in North Africa. But no. You did exactly what you've been doing for 6 years. Anything that you took even a slightly hard stance on, less than 5 minutes later, you go full pussy on it. Instead of turning around and saying, hey, you know what? They killed 2 Americans. And yes, I know that they're killing other people in North Africa and Iraq and Syria, and by virtue of what we're going to do, they will be freed. But we're going over to get them for what they've done to the Americans. And the threat that they have to the region is going to be taken care of as well. If other international community members join us, outstanding. We welcome them. I know the Brits, more and more as these days go on, do want a piece of that. However, we are going to do it because 2 Americans were kidnapped and murdered, and we will not tolerate this. But he couldn't do it. He had to go to that apologist mentality. He had to go to that international community mentality. There were Americans that were killed, not United Nations. Not this coalition. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against coalitions as long as they're willing to jump on board and follow our lead. But the problem is we're not leading. We're not leading. You know who the leader of the free world should be? No. The President of the United States of America should always be the leader of the free world. Because that's what we've always done. We've always led. We've always been exceptional. We've always done what the right thing was. And people followed our lead. Ag pointed out in the chat room, we used to be loved by the entire world minus Russia and North Korea and a couple of other satellite states in the Middle East. But the rest of the world loved us. And we've gone away from that. And now, and Ken said that Putin's now the leader of the free world. No, you know who I honestly believe is, right now? It's a toss-up. Bibi Netanyahu. And not because of money, military power, whatever, but just how he leads. It's a free country. He doesn't apologize for protecting his people. He will never apologize to anything except why he never apologizes, is the point I'm trying to make. And based on his speech earlier this week, David Cameron's up there as well, too, now. He said something. First of all, Obama couldn't get off, and I talked about this last week. It still pisses me off. Obama couldn't get off the golf course for Foley when he was murdered, but Cameron cancels a vacation when an American is murdered. Who recognizes the problem? Who recognizes the action? And thank you for everyone who's in the chat room right now. I'm not ignoring you, and I apologize, but I'm on a roll.
I was just sitting back here waiting, watching you.
David Cameron, and how long is his speech, Sacco, on that?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay, good. Way to be. Cue it up because it's not too far away.
It's 2 minutes.
Okay. You know what? David Cameron had this earlier to say, or they raised the threat level in England as soon as Mr. Foley was murdered. Go.
Earlier today, the Home Secretary confirmed that the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre has increased the threat level in the United Kingdom from substantial to severe. This is the first time in 3 years that the threat to our country has been at this level. We've all been shocked and sickened by the barbaric murder of American journalist James Foley, and by the voice of what increasingly seems to have been a British terrorist recorded on that video. It was clear evidence, not that any more was needed, that this is not some foreign conflict thousands of miles from home that we can hope to ignore. The ambition to create an extremist caliphate in the heart of Iraq and Syria is a threat to our own security here in the UK. We've already taken a whole range of measures to keep our people safe. We are stopping suspects from travelling by seizing passports. We're barring foreign nationals from re-entering the UK. We're depriving people of citizenship. And we are legislating so we can prosecute people for all terrorist activity, even where that activity takes place overseas. But it is becoming clear that there are some gaps in our armoury, and we need to strengthen them. We need to do more to stop people travelling, to stop those who do go from returning, and to deal decisively with those who are already here. I'll be making a statement in the House of Commons on Monday. This will include further steps to stop people travelling, with new legislation that will make it easier to take people's passports away. Britain is an open, tolerant and free nation. We are a country that backs people in every community who want to work hard, make a contribution and build a life for themselves and their families. But we cannot stand by and allow our openness to be confused with a tolerance of extremism, or one that encourages different cultures to live separate lives and allows people to behave in ways that run completely counter to our values.
First of all, again, there's a statement to be made about Rotherham there. However, that was just after David Foley was murdered. ISIS murdered David Foley and David Cameron within a few days. Came out, had a plan. Their country took action. I believe that it went from, their threat level went from slightly perturbed to aggravated or something like that, or snotty to angry or whatever. But they did something decisive, quick. They told their people, I know we have a caller on the line, we told their people that something was going to be taken care of and that this would not be tolerated. And it was an American who was murdered, and they took such action also based on the fact that it's a British Islamist extremist. But there was something that was done. He had conviction in his voice. He said to his people this would not be tolerated. He came out and led. And again, we get nothing from our president except for some murmuring and apologizing and looking to the international community to protect us. Listen, we're up against a break. I know someone was on the line, and I apologize. We can get to you. If you want to call back, Sacco can talk to you while we're going into the break. We're going to take a long break. Do you have a Miller Report? It is Miller time here at 9 o'clock on the SHR Media Network and the Sackheads Radio Show. He's going to give us an elongated news brief. I'm going to rest my throat for a second and get a drink, and we'll be back with you here in a few on the Sackheads Radio Show.
Radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SA.
From the SHR Media Newsroom, I'm Jason Miller. Bosnia police have detained 16 people suspected of having fought in Syria and Iraq or of recruiting and funding other Balkan men to join the Islamic militants there. Police say about 200 officers from a number of Bosnian law enforcement agencies were involved in an operation targeting 17 locations around the country. Those arrested were suspected of recruiting Bosnian nationals for Syria and Iraq and funding and organizing their travel to the two countries, police said. They were also suspected of participating in armed conflicts in Syria and Iraq, where they fought alongside radical terrorist groups and organizations, including the Islamic State group. During the search of locations where suspects were arrested, police found and seized weapons, ammunition, computer equipment, telephone cards, and propaganda material. Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri has announced in a videoed message the creation of an Indian branch of his militant group to raise the flag of jihad across South Asia. In the 55-minute video posted online, Zawahiri pledged renewed loyalty to Afghan Taliban leader Mullah Omar. Correspondents say his stated allegiance is an apparent snub to Islamic State militants. ISIS is challenging al-Qaeda to lead worldwide Islamic militancy, announcing the formation of al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent using a mixture of his native Arabic and Urdu, widely spoken in Pakistan. Zawahiri appeared eager to regain some of the spotlight. Counterterrorism experts say al-Qaeda's aging leadership is vying with ISIS to recruit followers after the success of militants in the Middle East is attracting young followers worldwide by conquering large amounts of territory across Iraq and Syria. The two groups fell out in 2013 over the ISIS expansion into Syria and carried out decapitations, crucifixions, and other forms of capital punishment. President Barack Obama will lead a UN Security Council session on the threat of foreign fighters in Iraq and Syria on September the 25th, a U.S. official said Wednesday. The meeting will take place at the level of heads of state or government and coincide with the annual United Nations General Assembly, according to a U.S. envoy. It will be the second time that Obama chairs a meeting of the top world body. In 2009, he presided over a meeting on nuclear nonproliferation. The United States currently holds the rotating presidency of the 15-member council. The Democratic candidate in the U.S. Senate race in Kansas against the three-term Republican incumbent Pat Roberts ended his campaign on Wednesday. Democratic Chad Taylor sent a letter to the Kansas Secretary of State withdrawing from the race. The race also had a viable independent candidate, Oathly businessman Greg Orman, as well as Libertarian candidate Randall Baston of Wichita. Taylor issued a separate statement saying he had made the decision after consulting with his staff, supporters, and Democratic Party leaders. He did not give a reason. Effective today, my campaign is terminated, he said. Originally, the statement said suspended, but the word was lined through and replaced with a handwritten terminated. Taylor is the district attorney in Cheyenne County, home of the state capital of Topeka. He won the office in 2008 and was re-elected without opposition in 2012. Orman had positioned himself as Roberts' most formidable opponent, and his fundraising was more robust than Taylor's. Orman issued a statement calling Taylor a committed public servant. Roberts' executive campaign manager Leroy Towns issued a statement accusing Orman of engineering a corrupt bargain with the National Democratic Party. Roberts remains favored to win the race in GOP-leaning Kansas. Republicans have won every U.S. Senate contest since 1932. There is fresh evidence that Republicans are inching toward winning control of the Senate in November. The bipartisan George Washington University Battleground poll released Wednesday has the GOP ahead on the generics congressional ballot by 4 percentage points, 46 to 42%. More anomalously for Democrats in states where there is a competitive Senate race. Republicans led the generic ballot by 16 percentage points, 52 to 36. Though the American public is as divided as it has been all year, we head into the 2014 general elections. The advantage among likely voters is flowing towards Republicans, said Christopher Anatron, George Washington University professor of political management and poll director. The generic congressional ballot has long been a general marker for how parties stand with the public heading into important votes. It asks a simple question: are you more likely to vote for a Democrat or a Republican to represent your congressional district in the fall? Respondents don't get the names of the people running to specifically represent their area. Voters' feelings about these individuals might sway their answer to the generic question about Democrats versus Republicans, so candidate identifications are left out. Republican strategists are particularly pleased about the party's advantage in this new poll because the generic ballot often skews towards Democrats. That's simply because there are usually more Democrats than Republicans in the U.S. About 44% of U.S. adults identify with or lean towards the Democratic Party, according to a recent Gallup survey. 39% lean toward or identify with the GOP. And now this.
At St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, our discoveries have helped drive the childhood cancer survival rate from 20% to 80%. And we share our research all across America.
I'm 80% sure I'll spoil my kids. I'm 80% sure I'll break boys' hearts. I'm 80% sure we're chick magnets.
80%? I'll take those odds.
Give thanks for the healthy kids in your life and give to those who are not. Go to stjude.org or shop wherever you see the St. Jude logo.
The man who bills himself as the House of Representatives' most unique and courageous conservative is seeking true patriot interns for the fall. Vapid granolas need not apply. According to an anonymous job listing posted to the GOP Job Bank, Texas Representative Steve Stockman, better known as the congressman who invited Ted Nugent to attend President Barack Obama's State of the Union address, is in search of smart, happy interns to work on meaningful projects. Ideal candidates will be true patriots who can count up to 17 in trillions and care more about future generations than they do about sucking up to current leadership, the description reads. Mushy, pleasers, appeasers keep walking. Hint, the listing adds, vapid granolas who fear guns, hate babies, are ashamed of America and think Islamic terrorists and illegal aliens are just misunderstood will not be comfortable here. Last year, Stockman invited the fired rodeo clown who wore an Obama mask in the Missouri rodeo to perform in his home state. In July, Stockman introduced legislation that would end the current border crisis by building a full double fence along the U.S.-Mexico border, deploying additional law enforcement to the border, detaining gang members, punishing countries that refuse to accept repatriated illegals, and banning welfare benefits for amnestized illegals. The unpaid internships are for the remainder of the year, as Stockman, who lost in a bid to unseat Texas Senator John Cornyn in the Republican primary this spring, is giving up his House seat in January. Schedules and end dates are negotiable if you're worth it, the listing says. We do not insist on specific arbitrary submissions. Send us whatever personal materials you think that will give us a reason to hire you, even if that's just a standard boring resume and a canned cover letter. Writing samples are encouraged, but not required, because even a shorter cover letter belies and betrays the lousy writer. Brevity is the soul of wit. This member is not a jerk and neither loathes nor avoids interns, but loves them, and actually speaks to them. Cornyn, the Senate Minority Whip, clobbered Stockman 63% to 17% in the March primary. Stockman was elected to represent Texas's 36th congressional district in 2012. He previously served as the representative for Texas's 9th congressional district from 1995 to 1997. For all the latest news every day, Monday through Friday, tune in to the Evan Miller Report at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, right here on the SHR Media Networks. From the SHR Media Newsroom, I'm Jason Miller. Now back to the Sackheads Radio Show on the SHR Media Networks.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we're back here on the SHR Media Network. This is the Sackheads Radio Show. Sackhead Sean, Sackhead Clint is off this evening. The best color man in the business, Sackheads. Yeah. You know, haven't you ever, sure. Dude, haven't you ever seen Major League? Charlie Sheen? No, you weren't even born when that came out.
We're going to bring it.
Bob Uecker, that was one of the best parts of that home. He's not the best color man in the business for nothing, folks. We appreciate you guys showing up. Immediately in the chat room, I get attacked. Ken automatically assumes, and this tells you what Ken's brain is. All right? Ken automatically assumes I said best colored man.
Well,
now,
you did.
You are tanned.
You did say best colored man.
But if I meant best colored man, I obviously would be talking about Ken. I think that pretty much... Wait, can I say that? I don't know. That might have to go to the racist to funny bin. We have to figure out which one that is.
I'm going to go with the racist.
If Ken calls in, I have a story today, and Clint is my witness because I called him almost immediately. I have a story today that is absolutely hysterical, and I still need to know. I'm always shocked, but Ken keeps throwing out there that he's black, and I don't even know if I can believe him. I just don't know. We're waiting. Agador, I think, is going to join us on the phone here.
He's here.
Is he here? Put him right through.
Hey, buddy.
Ag, you with us?
Well, he was with us.
Wow, huh? What did you do to him?
Dude,
why is it when we have nice people call in, you hang up on him?
I promise
you need to stop this.
Nothing.
Can you call him back?
Oh, he's still there.
Oh, he might be muted.
He's probably muted.
Oh, boy, Ag. I don't know. I think he's setting us up. I can't hear you talk. Is he unmuted?
I don't hear the guy. Listen, Ag,
Nothing but the finest radio production in the world, folks, here on the SHR Media Network. Work on it, Sacco. See if you can get him through. I do want to pick up, and I know Ag is probably going to comment on this when he comes through. There was a Breitbart story that came out on the 29th of August by Brandon Darby. And it's based out of Lubbock, Texas. And the title of the article, and if this doesn't scare you, nothing will. Breitbart, Texas, verifies ISIS border threat with leaked document. Now, I talked earlier. The king of Saudi Arabia said that they would be in Europe in a month and in America in 2 months, and I immediately said that was false. I immediately said that they're already here in one form or another. And I posted a thing, I think, last week that Iggy linked to us, Iggy in the chat room, linked to us about the guy in Seattle that already started killing people as part of jihad. And I said, we have one of the most porous borders in the world. Mexico doesn't care who comes through if you pay enough money, and that's just how Mexico operates. They're here, or if they're not here, they're going to be close. And come to find out that federal agents... Wow. Egg, you have no idea how loud that was in my ear, but now, my friend, I know you're there.
Hey.
How are you, sir?
Ag?
What in the hell is that?
Egg, you going to mute us in the background.
I'm good, fellas. I'm good.
Good. How are you? You having fun yet?
You're
okay,
like
you're
3
in the
seconds
background, but I can't hear you.
Oh.
Okay, this is Skype calling y'all. You're getting me on about a 7-second delay. I promise not to swear unless you want me to. I'll try back.
Okay.
Well, actually, I think this is it right
Well,
now.
okay. Hold up.
Yeah.
Was that better?
Yeah, I can actually hear you now.
Oh, goody. All right. Well, I like it when you can do that. You know, this is why Sacco spends as much time in the cage as he does, because he's supposed to have all this stuff figured out. But tonight, no. Tonight you wanted to play co-host. Tonight you wanted to play co-host, and this is what happens. Your number one job, the production aspect of it.
I fixed it in like 10 seconds.
Oh, Egg. Listen, Egg, I can only deal with what I have. You know what I'm saying, brother?
I like how you turn against me at this point. I'm right across the room from you. Ag, he's not going to help you from that far away. I got a water bottle. I got a pen.
Wait a minute. Oh, okay, you got a pen. Okay, but you know, I'm not really sure you have a phone.
No, he does have a phone.
There's a paper. Okay.
Egg, what would you love to add to this wonderful show this evening?
Oh man, it's just all insanity. I mean, the denial that is coming from the apologists for all this stuff, all this ISIS stuff. I mean, you have actors. I can't remember what the name of this one actor is. You know, he's got the long Jesus hair. You know, and he's saying that beheadings are less fall. you've got Obama making his speech, and it sounds like he had some free speech tunes before he came out to give the speech. I mean, my God. If you remember Animaniacs, Perry Como, the guy who did Ed Bellany could have done a better job at giving this speech. Man, it was just terrible. And if you want to contrast that speech to the one that President Bush gave. I think this was on September the 20th, 2001, at the joint session of Congress. Okay, that was when Tony Blair was there, and just it was possibly the best presidential moment that I've ever seen outside of Reagan. It was tremendous. You get that, and then you get Obama roll up and say, "I got nothing." I mean, what a contrast is this?
Well, and that's the scariest part, and I say that I said this. We were talking about it this week off air, and I said, if he went out there and said, "Hey, you know what? We have something going, and in the interest of security, I'm not, and classified information, I'm not going to disseminate our approach, but we have an approach right now." I can almost, it's a sidestep, and we give him crap about that all the time. But at least that would say to the American people, hey, you know what? We know this is a problem, and we're trying to deal with it. But when you go out and you literally just kind of throw your hands up in the air and you're like, nothing. What does that tell?
You know what?
Not.
Yeah. But you know what? I figured out about this. Okay, it could be. Now, this is an outside chance, mind you. But if it happens, I'm going to break this here, and I'll do it on Islam Exposed. Again tomorrow, 1 o'clock on Blog Talk Radio.
Check them out.
With,
plug. Go.
And with Kel Fritzy and Tim Burton. Would it not be brilliant? Because did anybody really expect him to have anything? Would it not be brilliant if we went through all this, everybody bagging on him for coming out and saying, "I got nothing," and then he sweeps in and wipes out ISIS within a week or two with some brilliant strategy, basically lulling them into a false sense of security.
Hey,
I would love it if that were the case.
We talked about this last week, and I think you joined us in chat when we had fun at the end of the show talking about how the president could win back a lot of people by doing something like that, by taking it to them, throwing it in their face, and what I mean. But I'm completely honest, and I know this is when a lot of people in the chat room have a tendency to attack me. But when the president does something right, I do support him, and not because it's Obama, but because I support the office of president. And I support our nation. And if it's the right thing to do for our nation, I have to give him credit when it's done. Now, the last 6 years, I'm looking around, and I think I have a total of maybe 2 or 3 on the checklist, and one of them was kill bin Laden. But I would absolutely love it if we woke up tomorrow and he went strutting out to the stage and was like, hey, guess what? Remember that whole no plan thing? Yeah, I was just screwing with y'all. 250,000 ISIS members are dead, including that one British guy who cut off our Americans' heads. High five. If you want pictures, they're on the internet. I'm going to play golf, and I'm out. If he said that, I would honestly say, well, you know what? He did his damn job, and he did it well, and he deserves credit for it. Unfortunately, much like his speeches, I don't think it's going to happen.
No, I honestly don't think so either. And I kind of want to put my own oar in on that as far as that goes. I support anything that advances America and anything that attacks Islam because obviously it's just plain evil. But even if Obama, the worst president of my lifetime, possibly ever in the history of presidents, were to do something like this, I would have to go on the 2 outlets that I have access to and praise the guy. That Islam Exposed and the Unpleasant Blind Guy, which is on Pundit Press Media. I'd have to praise him. Again, not because he's not because of who he is, not because of the things he's done in the past, but because of how he has been able to accomplish something. That, by the way, is not something that the left would do. Most of the left would do.
Absolutely not.
Right out say that. But we have to give credit where credit is due. We have to be honest about this stuff. But yes, sadly I'm in agreement with you. I don't believe, that he's got a plan. I think at this point he has such a reactive administration that what's happening is that he's asked his general, "Hey guys, what do we do now?" He's asked, the Joint Chiefs, whatever, and this is after the fact, even though they've been looking at ISIS as a separate group for months now. Now it's only now I believe that his administration is saying, "Okay, what do we do now, fellas? What do we do with this one? I told Hillary that I wasn't going to damage her reputation and trying to make sure that she could win in 2016, and I want to keep my word to Hillary because I don't want her saying bad things about me, even though I can say bad things about her, even because I'm black." I mean, they're reacting.
I like your
impersonation.
That was spot on.
I knew who you were talking about right off the bat.
No.
Well, lost you guys again.
No, we're here.
No. I was just giving you a moment.
Okay.
No, listen, I agree. And we all know, though, unfortunately, even his tan suit is an empty suit. He's an empty suit president. He was an empty chair candidate, and he's an empty suit president. And everything he does, like you said, is a reaction, and it's not even the right reaction. Listen, if he was totally reactionary, and he did so in a manner that was strong and decisive, and he doesn't have to be a man of action or anything like that, but strong, decisive, and positive for our nation. I can almost excuse that. If he was one of those guys who's like, "Hey, you know what? You never throw the first punch, but when it's time to punch back, you punch hard." I can respect that approach. A little more of the wait and see type
have a lot
of thing.
fight, never start a fight, but always finish it.
Exactly, and I'm okay with that. But to go out there, and you heard the speech, and I don't know how he talks out of both sides of his mouth without somehow dislocating his jaw. But it's monotone. He doesn't arouse America in the way that they should be. He doesn't engage. People are pissed off, and you heard the contrast between him and Joe, and Joe is pissed off. And I think when he goes full Biden.
Full Biden.
I really think he's speaking from the heart, whether it's the right thing or not. I think we all know Joe doesn't have a mute button on when he goes full Biden, and I think that was Joe speaking from the heart, and I'm okay with that. Like I said earlier, I enjoy that because that shows you that his heart's at least in the right place, even if his brain is so far up his rear end he needs to see a proctologist to cure his headaches. But this president,
I was just going to drop in. Much of a freak as Biden is. 30 years ago, you would have wanted Joe Biden at your party because your party would have blown up with Biden.
Oh yeah,
you would have wanted him there.
We say it all the time. If I could go back in time, I would love to party with Biden. I think Biden would be a hell of a guy to party. And listen, I don't think Biden's a bad guy. I think his politics suck, but I think he's not a terrible person. I think he's a fun guy. I think he's a happy guy. I think that he is caught up in an administration that, if Biden was under Clinton even, I think he'd be a totally different vice president. But they keep him quiet because all they wanted him to do was use him to get the older Democrats to vote and elect them. That's all Biden was used for. He wasn't used for his amazing policy making. He wasn't brought in because he's an amazing diplomat. And the guy's kind of a screwball in a good way. All he did was bring older Democratic vote in 2008 and again in 2012. And the only reason he was in his 2012 is because they didn't want to pull the trigger on Hillary because things were starting to look a little hairy for the president. So that's all Biden was there for. And he's been kept in a cage next to Sacco, essentially, the rest of the time and only allowed out for certain things. And then when he said something that was, two through the door with the shotgun, things like that, they stuff him right back in that cage, and you don't hear from him for 4 months.
Is that how you feel about me?
Yes.
I also think they had him there because, it's like I said in general, he plays the clown on purpose. But he was also in the Senate forever before he ever became vice president. And I think he knows how to keep the Democrats, at the very least, in the Senate in line. And I think that's the way that Obama uses him. And he's more than happy to oblige because he's been in there so damn long. He just does all this by reflex. I mean, at this point, a house plant with mental disability issues could do this stuff. He just does it, and that helps Obama, and he's fine with it. He's fine with it.
No, I agree. I agree. But I think today, and you know what? I'll tell you right now, Valerie Jarrett and Biden are both going to be pretty pissed off, I bet, at Joe for that speech today. Because I think it was candid. It showed that somebody in the White House actually had their feathers ruffled, which is something this president, for whatever reason, does not like the image that he is at all upset or has some sort of emotion. And I really think, like I said, I think it's going to draw a sharp contrast. And you know what? Joe may have just done his first real political stomp for 2016 for himself. I really think so. Whether that was his intent or not, I think he just did. That's going to be a sound clip that when the 2016 starts rolling around, he can say, no, wait, look at how I dealt with ISIS from the beginning, if they're still dealing with it then. And this is the approach I want to go with. I want to follow them to the gates of hell, and I want to stuff them in there and make sure that they never get out. And I really think that that's something that is going to be a strong sound for Joe. I mean, it is what it is. That's Joe.
Yeah, you just made me think, though, from saying what you did about Biden's emotionalism versus Obama's lack of it. Now, Obama, despite some people's objection, is human. And given the way we've seen him act in his public life over the years, I have to wonder how he really handled stress behind closed doors. Could it be that another one of Biden's uses is so that Obama doesn't have to get really angry and you don't see the really angry Obama? I mean, could the really angry Obama be some guy whose eyes bug out, gets a big blood vein in his forehead, and he starts screaming like a maniac? I mean, could that be what is lurking behind those closed doors?
I wish.
That nobody talks about?
I wish.
Yeah, do we know though? But do we know?
But I think that's the problem that I bring up is we don't know who the real Obama is in situations like this. If that's the real Obama, then that's the Obama that should show up, and that's the Obama that should take action. I want him to be mad. I want to see my president get angry when 2 Americans are beheaded, and he is threatened personally along with the victims of the family. I think he needs to get mad. And I think it would show this company. I think it would show this country that it's okay to fight back occasionally.
Well, it's almost like Obama is a misdirected Jedi. You know, I can't get angry because that's the dark side of the Force. But if you're as much of a geek as I am and you read the Star Wars books, you come to find out that sometimes you can use anger and not go over to the dark side, and you can win. Go ahead.
I equate it to my grandmother, and I kid you not, and this is a true story. My grandmother was about 5'6", maybe 95 pounds soaking wet. Tiny little old thing.
Right.
My uncle, who was about 12 years old, they had a whole bunch of railroad ties stacked end on end on end as they were building a new set of train tracks. And my uncle was walking with my grandmother up the path next to the tracks, and he was playing with it, and she warned him to get away, and one of them fell on him. And my grandmother said, I was so pissed off at him because he wasn't listening, and now he had a couple 100 pounds of railroad tie on top of him. She said, and my uncle tells the story verbatim. She picked up the railroad tie with one arm, screaming and yelling the entire time, and dragged my uncle out, and then was spanking him before she even put the railroad tie back down because she was so focused on being mad at him that he almost killed himself, she didn't think to drop it. And if you met my grandmother, she's the quietest, sweetest person on the face of the planet. And she is. And she would never hurt anyone until you hurt one of her children. And then it's game on. And I think that's how the president needs to be. Hey, you know what? I'll be quiet, easygoing, whatever. Just don't bother us. But if you bother us, you are going to deal with a wrath that you cannot possibly understand. If you hurt one of my citizens, one of my people, the people that elected me to lead them, the freest country on the face of the planet, the citizens of the United States of America, if you even think about hurting one hair on their head, you will have to deal with me on levels that you can't even begin to understand. And that's a promise. I'm okay with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, he needs to be Will Smith at the end of Men in Black. Don't start nothing. Don't be nothing. That's who he needs to be.
Well, if we're going to make references, I wish he'd be like Bill Pullman in Independence Day, but that's not going to happen either.
No, it's not. I mean, now I got to say, I know a lot of people think he's a Muslim. Okay, now I know this. We don't know whether or not he was ever baptized Christian, but we do know that his father was a Muslim, and any child born of a Muslim is, by default, a Muslim. So there's that. And people can take that and use it in whatever sense they want to. If he was baptized, he was. He certainly, though, has a sympathy with the Muslims. A lot more than, in my opinion, an American president should, especially one that grew up with a Muslim father. You would think that he might have at least thumbed through the Quran and the Sunnah and had at least an idea of what Islam is all about. You would think that this man would be hardcore about Islam, but he isn't. He is extremely accommodating.
Well, and it's one of those things I said in the show. It's like everything else. He says he's a Christian. I'm not going to sit here and argue with him. I wasn't there. Right. And I understand his upbringing, and by virtue of that too. Then he's also a socialist and a communist. So we could go down that road as well. At the end of the day, I think in his mind, and this is this egotistical kind of over the top way that he is. He thought he was going to be the bridge between America and the Middle East, an area that is so destroyed through war that we were involved in, et cetera, et cetera. I really think he kind of looks at himself as like the patron saint of the Middle East, if you will, because St. Michael he ain't. That he feels like it's his personal mission in life to cross that over, and I don't know why he feels that's so important, and we could sit here and venture and guess on it, but I agree with you. His sympathy for the bad people over there that do horrible things is far and away what it should be, and I hope someday he'll explain it. But he doesn't even acknowledge it.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. And I think some of it does have to do with his upbringing or the environment he had to grow up in. I mean, if you think about it, growing up a mixed-race kid in the 1970s was not an easy road, regardless of where you grow up, but Kansas, Indonesia, anywhere. Okay?
Hawaii.
It's not like you had Hawaii. It's not like you had mixed-race parents. It wasn't good for you. At the same time, he grew up intelligent, and people spotted that. So he was being treated alternatively like a piece of crap or like a little demigod. Piece of crap, demigod. Piece of crap, demigod. Guess which one he aspires to? And guess which demigod. One he has and guess which one he now sees himself as. He may not see himself as a godlike figure, but he could definitely see himself as you say, the demigod that brings the Middle East and the West together in some big kumbaya Islamic socialist wonderland, basically replacing the two legs of the United States of America, which are principles and our Constitution, with something else with two legs, which are the Quran and socialism. I think that's what he's aiming for, and everything that he's done has led to that. Go ahead. Sorry.
I also, and I do want to get to the story out of Texas here in a few minutes, which it's perfect that you're on the air for this. But I have a friend of mine who studied psychology, and they're convinced that this is his way, and they're actually a psychologist or a shrink, but this is his way to bridge that gap to his father that he never had when he was a child. Because of, yeah. And listen, I mean, you can read Dreams from My Father or whatever, but at the end of the day, his father was an absentee dad. His father pushed him away. His father wasn't around unless it was convenient. His grandparents and his mom did a lot of the raising. He was sent to Indonesia for a while. I mean, his dad came in and out when it was convenient for his dad. And I think that anger turned into another kind of approach, and that could very well be, listen, his dad was Muslim. That's where the highest concentration of Muslims are in the world. That could very well be a role, too. And I'm not a shrink, and we could sit here and throw out hypotheses all day long. But it doesn't change where we're at, the fact that he is not a decisive individual, and he is not one who's going to take action.
I think you're right. I think that could be a motivator. I think part of him could be saying, see, Dad, you should have hung around, because if you had, you would have seen how awesome I was. You should have hung around, man. Mm-hmm. And I think there's merit in that. And what it winds up being, as you say, is we're in deep doo-doo, and this guy's doing nothing.
Yeah, and he doesn't even have a plan. And, it bothers me. I'm reading this report out for Breitbart out of Texas, essentially saying that the feds have released a warning that ISIS is as close as Juarez, Texas, and setting up, and they may be doing vehicle-borne style attacks. And we're talking about the lone wolf or small unit tactic attacks, et cetera, and it's right across the border. And this was released August 29th is when it was released to Breitbart from the Texas Department of Public Safety. I do immediately question the pictures that were sent that are attached to this, and if you go to Breitbart.com, it's on there. The pictures that are attached, there was a reporter who dressed like bin Laden who, to show that he could do it, crossed into Mexico, dressed up, looked exactly like bin Laden, and came back across the border without ever being contacted. And it actually kind of looks like that guy. So I do want to point that one part out. But do I really think that ISIS is already in Mexico? Wow, I've had a long day.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I hear you.
Absolutely. Do I think they could be in areas like Juarez where they're either paying off or somehow supplying or working with the cartels down there? Absolutely. I really think that this is something that we need to be fearing right now. And now, here we are 8 days away from 9/11. We haven't raised our awareness in this country. And as much as everyone hates the TSA, I would at least, if the TSA turned around and went, hey, yeah, you know what, we're going back to post 9/11 rules for a few weeks. You can't bring this, that, or whatever on the other, just to at least show that there's something to be concerned about. I would be at least a little bit like, all right, so they're doing something. We could talk about whether or not TSA should exist, but at least they're doing something. If you started seeing post 9/11 security at bridges and federal buildings and stuff like that, even for the next couple weeks, okay, but we have, and this is the liberal lull to sleep, eat your grass, sheep approach of, if we don't tell you there's anything to worry about, everything's fine, you just keep calm and chive on type thing, don't even sweat it. They're not that close. And this is why I believe that we are so underprepared for these attacks in this country that I know what's going to happen is, God forbid these attacks are going to happen. People are going to immediately look around and say, well, why did that happen? Or how could that happen?
Oh, I know. I had a friend who's apolitical, brilliant guy, but apolitical. And I was trying to prove him in on some of the things that were happening with Islam over in the UK. And, he kept insisting that this had nothing to do with the state and all this kind of thing. And in the end, he literally screamed at me, "Who cares? It's England." He didn't get it. I mean, Sue from New Mexico, who I know you've heard of,
yep,
who used to have a show on RZ's thing on BTR.
Yep, reactionaries.
Has been reporting on this. Yeah, has been reporting on this for years, finding
Yep.
prayer rugs out in the desert with them coming through, and things like that. This is nothing new. It's just
as recently as a week ago, there's a farmer who's claiming to find Pakistani to English dictionaries on his property.
Yeah. Oh, sure. And it's just wearing the face of ISIS now, and this particular bunch of monsters just happens to be extremely well funded, and money brings power. And now you bring that in with the cultural thrust that Islam brings with it, which is you can be a misogynistic sociopath all you want, or a misogynistic psychopath. Take your choice, and it's all cool. Now, okay, I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna say something controversial. There have been some who have cited before. This was long before most of us began worrying about Islam. They were citing honor killings in South America, and this is because of certain aspects of culture in some of the Hispanic countries. This is one thing that worries me a lot: is that there may be certain aspects of Islam that will mesh very well with some of those darker aspects of the Hispanic culture. No, I am not saying Hispanic people are as bad as Islamists. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that Islam does flood very well into the darker aspects, not only their culture, but everyone. But there is that ready-made component, and it's right on our southern border. There's been a virtual war going on in Texas, New Mexico, all along our southern border for years, and it's been mostly ignored by people in the other states because they don't think.
Well, yeah, and it's out of sight and it's out of mind, and a lot of things that's going on is mainstream media refuses to report it, and because it like I said, it's that leftist approach of don't worry, there's nothing to worry about, and I equate it to the sheep eating the grass. They're out in the field eating grass, and one by one sheep are disappearing, and the other sheep are kind of looking around saying, "Hey, where'd Joe go? Oh, don't worry about it. Just keep eating the grass." Well, eventually you become Joe, and you're the last sheep out there, and you're surrounded by wolves, and all because you couldn't pay attention.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And you know what I equate it all with now? People like us, people who are woken up a bit, and others. I equate it to the African savannah at a water hole. You got a bunch of antelope out there at the water hole.
Yes.
They're drinking. You've seen this on a number of these wildlife things, right? They're drinking at the water hole. The lion comes up in the long grass, right? And they're drinking. And one of them hears something. The ear twitches, and the head just whips up. It looks around for that lion, and they know that lion is there. And then they all take off. That is where a lot of people like us who are trying to warn people about this crap are at this point. We hear the lion in the long grass. The others are the antelopes that aren't listening. I don't know if they're slurping the water too loud, or if they're thinking about that antelope beside them, that antelope is pretty cute. They might want to make it
comfortable
later on.
You know what it is, Ag? Honestly, you know what it is, Ag, is I think it comes down to comfort, and I'll tell you why. When we're comfortable, we're spending money, we're creating money, we're going about our day-to-day lives. We are spending money at will. Listen, when we think something bad's going to happen, and we've done this for years in our country and our whole history, what historically happens when we go into wars or something like that? People stop spending money. They start saving it. I know World War II, Korea, all that. People start taking the money out of the banks and hiding it under their mattresses. So people become disrupted. they start taking matters into their own hands on certain cases. And all that stuff is bad for the economy. It's bad for that whole kind of day-to-day life. And, if you're a liberal, if you don't want that to happen, what's the best way to offset it? You just don't report it, or you don't let it get reported, or you downplay it, or you act like it's not a big deal. You call them the junior varsity team. You make excuses for them. You blame people like Alan Colmes does. You blame the people that are reporting on it for trying to scare America. We should be scared with this ISIS threat. It's something that we need to be scared of and turn that fear into a positive.
Yeah, we should have been scared of this all along. I can well remember 1979 and the Iran hostage crisis and everything. And you noticed, now President Reagan was the best president of my lifetime, but you noticed that once that was over, the left and everybody who could took advantage of our short attention spans, and that worry about Islam, for the most part, went away. Now there were some peaks in there, like when the Marine barracks was destroyed in Beirut, the Achille Lauro incident, things like this, that kept some people's radar on Islam. But everybody else was asleep, and they all had the same excuse. Well, here, why worry about it? It's here. Oh, hey, there's a Muslim in my neighborhood. Hello, Mr. Friendly Muslim. And of course, the Muslim is nodding his head. Oh, hello, how are you? Yeah, we don't like these guys because they are terrible. Oh no, we would never do. We love Jews. Yeah, and yeah, they do. But this is the point, though. You look at Flint, Michigan, and Dearborn right now, and these parades going down the street of these guys now screaming for Sharia law.
Yeah.
We should be scared. We should be scared, because this isn't just in England, and this isn't in Canada. Hello, Cal. This is in our face at this point. It is in our face, and it's not that we should all be running around yelling the sky is falling, but we should be concerned. We should be arming ourselves, training ourselves to use legal firearms. We should be making sure our gun laws don't call for national registrations where they can just come and snatch up our guns. In fact, we, on this very show, we've figured out a way we could take care of that.
Absolutely.
We could take care of a person's eligibility to get a firearm. We should be doing that stuff and preparing ourselves so that we won't be a soft target for these guys, because their ideology of Islam says that they must attack and they must make us submit. We have to show them that we are harder than that stupid rock they've got in Mecca. And, they ain't going to crack this rock. They may try and erode it, but they're not going to crack it. That's what we have to do, because if we don't, it's going to get real nasty. I'd say within 10 years. And that's it.
I think it's going to happen before then.
There. Oh, we'll certainly see bad indications before that. We will.
I honestly think, Ag, by the time we hit the end of the year, that we're going to have such a regular. We're going to actually. I think in 5 years, if we don't deal with this problem now and we don't get out ahead of it, we don't actually have a situation to resolve to take care of this, then I think in 5 to 10 years we will be a lot like Israel. We're going to be so used to it that it's going to be robotic. That we're the sirens are going off, go to the shelter. For us, it's that car bomb blew off. I just heard somebody yell Allahu Akbar 3 times. I better go hide under something. Like, I really believe that it will get to that point if we don't start to approach it and deal with it. And I'm afraid that we are already so far behind the 8 ball that it's going to take a lot to catch up.
It will. Yeah, I mean, I really don't want to see anyone hurt. But it's going to take a lot of people hurt. No, not at all. It's going to take a lot of people hurt, and it's going to have to be a lot of ordinary people. It's going to have to be an unintended consequence. It's going to have to be some of Obama's voter that they'll wind up that way, but because to make them turn around and say, okay, enough of this mess. All right, we did our due diligence and got the first black president in and kept him in for 8 years. Now it's time to take care of ourselves and our own neighborhood. And as you said, making gangs like the Crips, actual heroes against these people. I mean, yeah.
Sorry, that was still
insane.
one of the funniest things that we ever did on the show. But go on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was a great bit, man. I did admire it. Yes, we are here to declare the Islamic Republic.
Run! They have bigger guns than us. Their tank bounces down the street.
Oh yeah, man. But that's the thing. I mean, it will take. At this point, we can't depend on our government, and that's going to be. That's a point we raise all the time on Islam Exposed. Nobody in the West can depend on their government. Us, Canada, Australia, the UK, we can't depend on our government because they're bought off. I always say that people who don't understand Islam as a main-line problem, as the largest problem facing civilization, are either uninformed, brainwashed, or paid off. And too many in our governments are just plain paid off. It's just horrific. And it's up to us. It's going to be up to the people. It's going to be up to people like you and me and Ken and Kel and all these other people to raise the alarm and try and get the word about this out to the community. Because the state stream media is not going to do it.
Nope, and they're not. And you know how when they start talking down to us and attacking us on the level that we do things, and you have the president coming out, essentially going after bloggers last year and telling everyone how dangerous they are, et cetera, et cetera. That tells you that the nerve's been struck, and we need to keep that message going. One of the things that I would like to see amongst us and amongst our groups is a little bit of uniformity in the sense of getting on the same page, getting the same message out. We don't have to agree on the message itself, but I think one of the things that the blogosphere and the BTRs and the Live 365s, all the different groups is, hey, listen, if this story comes out and mainstream media is ducking it, we need to make sure that we're all putting it on the forefront. We're going to the social media. We're going on our shows. We're cross-promoting on other shows to discuss it. And that's the type of thing that we have to do because, listen, individually, we're not going to make the biggest splash in the world right off the bat. But I think as a group, and we have a great set of friends, not only here on SHR Media, but Pundit Press, great friends of our shows that are doing a great job, and they're doing their own thing. But, it's funny is the competition, it's not a competition for us. I think it's all the same common goal of getting the information out that needs to get out.
We all have individual talents. We all have individual hooks that we can use into this. You guys have.
I have no talent.
I really enjoy it. No. You guys have a great hook. I mean, you use completely inappropriate humor, which I love. I mean, I managed to honk off. Okay, I managed to get Tammy Bruce mad enough to stop her show and write me out in her chat room. Okay, that's how inappropriate I can get. I mean, there's humor. There's this people that don't belong in the box that people on the left want to put them in. There's these people that are beginning to be people that approach this from all these different angles. And the cool thing about it is, all of our shows are growing. We're getting more and more listeners because more and more ordinary people are starting to clue into this. They're starting to turn on to it. They're starting to go, well, okay, we just get the same crap from the cable news.
It's not regurgitation.
The podcast network. Yeah, exactly. I mean, okay. Did anybody? Let me ask you a question. Did anybody ever trust really Pravda even party members? Of course they did. Now, if it was the party organ, and if you could afford it, it was probably healthy for you to buy it. But nobody trusted it. They all knew it was crap.
Absolutely.
That's why they were tuning into the Voice of America.
Yeah, no, it was the best thing for them to get to, believe it or not. We do have a few minutes left, Egg. And I want to really quick talk about 9/11 coming up, and now 11 commercial airliners missing out of Libya. It is just frightening. For the people who don't know, the Libyan airport, and I believe it's was it Tripoli? I believe it was I believe it was Tripoli. Was overrun, and 11 commercial jetliners that were sitting at the tarmac have gone bye-bye. Now, some of those were said that they, right off the bat, that they were non-operational. Again, hopefully that's the case, and they weren't saying that to make people feel better. And, they said 7 were damaged. There's some photos out there. There might be 4 or 5 that were operational. They weren't 100% owned, some 737s. I think a 777 and something else. I don't know the types and the makes and models on them specifically, so I don't know if they have the legs to get from Libya to the United States, but I can certainly say that there are those, our friends in Europe and our friends in Israel and that entire area need to be on alert. Because this is definitely something scary, and it could turn out to be absolutely horrific.
Oh, and they, and of course they can be outfitted for transatlantic flight. And yes, people need to be concerned about that because could you imagine one of these things not only packed with fuel, but just completely packed with explosives? It would be basically a giant car bomb. It would almost be like a Moab if you fly into something.
Well, you know what the amazing part is that. Yeah, they could absolutely, and if they disguise it, you never know what they can try to pull off. There's so many people that are like, oh, they couldn't repaint it. No, they can pull stuff like that off. If they disguise it and they can somehow find a way to get legitimate flight plans and have it appear and disappear or whatever, if you get even a semi decent pilot at the controls of those, it could be used in such a bad way. I feel the worst with that. And, that's another thing that we should be on alert for, and I hope our fighters around the region are up and about because, again, this plane, if they're one of the long-term 777s, if they're the ones that are designed to go transatlantic, if it left now 12 hours, we could be worried on our coast. So that's not a lot of time.
Well, there's that, and I honestly can't think of a better way to quickly deliver an EMP attack.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And an explosive attack, absolutely. That's the easiest thing to do. But they could also deliver EMP. That's an even better way of delivering an EMP attack than to just take various small ships and move them toward our coast and just pop the things off there. They could go right to the middle of the United States.
Well, and that's just if they have one. Looks right now they may have 4 or 5 at least operational that we know of. And it's funny. One of the first posts I saw into that is, "Hey, everyone, remember how we lifted the Libyans training at our flight schools?" So that's always a comforting statement. Hey, I got to leave it there tonight, Ag. We got 2 minutes left. I got to close the show. Hey, what time are you on tomorrow? Where can we find you?
Okay, I'm at Pundit Press. Just look at Pundit Press Radio for the Unpleasant Blind Guy. I usually do a show about once a week. As for tomorrow, you're going to be on Islam Exposed on Blog Talk Radio, 1 o'clock Eastern. I'm joined by Kel Fritzy, the Red Box Club, and independent writer Tim Burton of Renter Brief. And please come and join us. We're going to have a 3-country discussion on Islam, and this particular one is revolved around these headings and other issues and our various government reactions to them. Thank you very much, Sean. I appreciate you. I appreciate Paco for having me on. Thank you, guys.
Hey,
good night.
It's our pleasure, and good night. There he goes.
Good night, Ag.
Appreciate that. Hey, we're at the end of the show. Thank you, everyone who joined us this evening in the chat room. Make sure you check out punditpress.com. Great friends of ours. The Exceptional Conservative one will be back here at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 on the East Coast tomorrow night here on the SHR Media Network, as well as Pundit Press. Get them at whichever one you want to do it. Go to SHR Media. Whichever choice you make is yours. Also, check out the Evan Miller Report tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. We will see you next Wednesday evening here on the Sackheads Radio Show, 8 p.m. on the Pacific time. Yeah, that's about
you
right.
Want to sell
11 p.m.
cars at an auction?
Yeah.
I think if you just speak a little bit faster.
Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Good night, Sacco. Thank you.
Better on the air to give you the best in conservative talk. The Sackhead Sean and Sackhead Clint. And we're working on immigration papers for a certain other guy who happens to work here too. For those who are tuning in around the world to the best late night conservative talk, Sackheads Radio. The best late night conservative talk show in America. In America. In America.
And in this web was a large, I'm pretty sure it was the biggest spider I've ever seen.